In the beekeeping world, there's a lot of information out there about how you should keep your bees, how you should treat them, what you should feed them, the types of bees you should have. There's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it is junk. Today we're debunking 5 common beekeeping myths. Good afternoon, beekeepers and bee enthusiasts. How are you doing? It's another great day at the farm. And we're hanging out. It is still November, it's still chilly, and it's still hoodie weather. But we're doing fine. We hope you and yours are doing fine as well. And of course, we have a wonderful topic for you planned today. And of course, today we are debunking 5 common beekeeping myths. Now, I like to go on YouTube and search different videos and stuff like that, especially when it comes to beekeeping. And I see a lot of YouTubers out there pushing information, telling you, you got to do this, you got to do that. You just absolutely have to do all these crazy and wacky steps in order for you to be successful as a beekeeper. And I kind of shake my head because over the last 6 years, we have been keeping our bees in a very simple, sustainable manner, and it's been great. I mean, I've been having a blast, and it's been a lot of fun. I've cut out like 90% of the work that we used to do a decade ago, and it's just been a lot more fun. We've really enjoyed it, and we know you're going to enjoy this video. So without further ado, let's break right into it. So the first myth we're debunking today is, of course, that treating is a requirement in order for your honeybees to survive. Now, a lot of people out there are very strongly opinionated that you absolutely must treat in order for you to have success in your apiary, or at least in order for your bees to survive. I've seen YouTubers out there say wild things like they've tried everything and their bees just die, and they have been forced to medicate their bees, and there's just nothing else they can do, and woe is me, all this other stuff, and so they're forced to treat, and that's just what they have to do. Now, the big thing I want to talk about is, of course, our past history, and then, of course, our recent history. Now, in the past, from 2011 to 2017, we treated our bees because in most common literature, they are out there telling you you need to treat, it has to be done. And that's what you read a lot in a lot of beekeeping books. So we did treat our bees. There's 2 things we did. We used mite strips, which if you don't know what a mite strip is, it is a substance that you lay across the top of the frames in your beehive, and it is supposed to treat the mites that are inside, and it is so toxic that you're not supposed to touch it with your bare hands. So that was one thing we did. The other thing we did was oxalic acid. And if you don't know what oxalic acid is, it is wood bleach. And what some beekeepers will do is they will take a vaporizer and they will put this wood bleach in the vaporizer and fog their bees with it to try to get rid of diseases on the inside. And some person long ago came out and said, well, this is working and all that stuff. And so a lot of people will use wood bleach to treat their bees. Now, we did this stuff every single year, and I was very strict about it. I mean, you know, I was being told that it absolutely had to be done, so I was very strict about treating. And I'm not kidding you, every single year, all of our colonies died. One year, we actually purchased about $2,000 worth of packages, which was about 10 packages, and every single colony died that year. It was crazy. I mean, the bees were just dying. We were suffering massive failure, and it was so bad that in 2017, we quit beekeeping and we stopped. Now, fast forward to 2019, we discover Lezutin's book, Keeping Bees with a Smile. And in that book, one of the big things he teaches is that honeybees don't need treatment in order for them to thrive. The bees are very capable of managing diseases in their hive if you just give them the chance. So we basically took that and said, okay, well, we're just not going to treat anymore. And so from 2019 to now, we have not done any treating, and our bees have done fine. They've been doing great. We've been having a good time. They've been surviving, and I have no reason to go back to treating my bees because we've discovered that it's just not necessary. And that is definitely a big myth out there. Now, another argument I want to make is, of course, honeybees that live in the wild, that live in trees, and, you know, they live out there, and they basically, they are not managed by any human beings, which also means they are not given any treatments or anything like that. And believe it or not, they survive every single year. And a lot of people that treat call these honeybees mite bombs, and they say, oh, they're spreading mites everywhere and we got to eliminate those wild bees. But if you're saying that honeybees can't survive without treatment, then why are those bees living in the wild and doing so well? Why is it every single year they do fine and they spread swarms and they're doing good, and they do just fine without any kind of treatment? I mean, if it's so necessary, then how can that happen? So just letting you know, treatment is not required in order for you to have success in your apiary. You don't need it. And if you go without treatment, you can actually find a very good apiary. So the next big myth we're debunking is that certain honeybee races can bring success to your apiary. Now, a lot of people out there push that there are lots of genetics you should aim for when you are acquiring new bees. And if you get certain types of honeybee races, you can bring those honeybee queens to your apiary and they will spread those genetics and you'll have them and your honeybees will do great. I remember 10 years ago, I always wanted Carnolian honeybees because something about them, they don't sting as much, they're more passive and they're more disease resistant. So I really wanted those types of honeybees and I was really excited to get one. I don't think I ever did buy a Carnolian honey queen, but that was something I was aiming to do. Now, what we want to talk about is why that is a waste of time. So let's talk about how honeybee queens work. So let's say you go and purchase a honeybee queen, let's say from Italy, and you get an Italian honeybee queen. And she comes into your apiary, she's laying eggs, she's doing her thing. When the swarm season comes, probably the next season, she will start laying queens and the hive will start raising queens. And when those queens are born, they'll fight over each other until you get one queen that basically will go out and mate with multiple drones out in the wild. And they mate with, it's like 10 to 15 drones or something like that. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere around there. But they go and mate with a bunch of drones. So the queens, when they mate, they are getting genetics from all over the area. They're getting genetics from all over the area. And she will eventually come back. And then what will happen next is that old queen you purchased from Italy, when the honeybee colony swarms, that old queen will leave with half of the colony and go somewhere else. And guess what? Now inside the hive, you have that new queen that has just received the genetics of all the honeybees in the area. So you trying to pick those certain type of genetics and whatnot, they just flew out the window in that swarm. So you trying to be particular with a certain type of race of honeybees it really is a waste of time. And really, truly, there is no certain honeybee race out there. Honeybees have more or less become mutts these days because they're always receiving genetics from colonies all over the place. So save yourself some time. Don't chase certain honeybee races, and it'll be a lot easier for you. So the next myth we're debunking is, of course, that packages and nucleus hives are the best way to acquire brand new bees. Now, if you don't know what a package or a nucleus hive is, well, a package is a straight up box of bees, and it is a scoop of bees, a queen. I think it's like 3 pounds of bees or something like that. And a lot of beekeepers, when they get started in beekeeping, they will buy a package of bees and they'll put it in and they'll insert the bees. And then of course, a nucleus hive is basically, it's also kind of like a box, but it has frames of honeybees on the inside. So you're not just getting honeybees and a queen, you're also getting frames with brood, maybe a little bit of honey, all that stuff. And a lot of brand new beekeepers, what they'll do is when they're acquiring new bees, they will either buy a package or a nucleus hive. Now, the biggest thing I tell people is when I recommend against these two options is that when you are picking up a package or a nucleus hive of bees, you're receiving the bees from a faraway distance, usually. Usually they'll come from multiple states away. And the thing with that is those bees that they're coming from, where they lived was a different climate than where you are located. And it could be, you know, the different flowers or different amounts of rain, or maybe it's colder or maybe it's warmer, all kinds of things like that. So you are introducing them to a new climate when you bring them to your location. And that, because of that, that gives them a high failure rate. A lot of bees, when they get introduced from faraway distances into new homes, they are very stressed out because, like, even the queen, she has a laying pattern. And for a climate that is warmer, she might lay honeybees a lot sooner in the season than if it was colder, where she would lay later in the season. So there's all kinds of complications that can come from receiving a nucleus hive or a package of bees. And because of that, they have high failure rates. I can't say for nucleus hives, but I know packages of bees have about a 50% failure rate. So it's a lot. And on top of that, you're spending usually around $200 for one package or one nucleus hive. And if they die, then you've just wasted your money. And, you know, whenever, I think I said earlier, when we purchased bees back in a decade ago, there was one year we purchased 10 packages and all of them died. And so that was $2,000 down the drain. And that was a big issue and one of the main reasons why we ended up quitting in 2017. Now, what is the solution to this problem? Well, of course, the solution is to catch honeybee swarms. So what we've done since 2019 is we have basically taken boxes and we've baited them and we've put them in trees. And then during the swarm season, there's a really good chance that a honeybee swarm can move into the box. And basically you catch the honeybee swarm and now you've caught a brand new colony. They've got a queen, they've got the bees, they've got everything. And they're doing good. And the greatest thing about catching swarms is they are local bees. They come from your local area. So they're used to your climate, they're used to the queen is used to the laying pattern, all that stuff. So swarms will do a lot better in your apiary. And the really nice thing is if the honeybee colony perishes, you haven't lost any money because the only thing you purchased was a swarm box and you basically put it in a tree. But if the honeybee colony perishes, you didn't spend money on the bees themselves, so you're not losing anything. And you can reuse that box every single year. We do it every year. We've got around 10 swarm hives that we put up all over the place and we catch bees with. And it's a lot easier that way. And we have definitely found success with catching swarms. All right, so moving right along. The next myth we're debunking is, of course, that you should feed your bees sugar if they are lacking in food. And a lot of beekeepers out there these days, they basically inspect their hives and they say, hey, my bees are lacking in food, or they're incapable of making food for themselves. And so I need to feed them some good old processed sugar water or powdered sugar. And they will give it to their bees. When we kept bees a decade ago, I used to feed my bees sugar water. It was like a super that I would put on top of my Langstroth hives. And it had a closed container on the inside and an entrance for the bees to get in. And they would go in and drink the sugar water and they would go with that. And we basically did that the whole time from 2011, 2017, feeding sugar water. Now, in 2019, when we found Keeping Bees with a Smile by Lazutin, he basically said in his book, he said that you shouldn't feed your honeybees sugar water or powdered sugar because sugar is a pure carbohydrate. It has no vitamins, it has no nutrients, it has none of that stuff. And believe it or not, it can actually contribute to more honeybee diseases. So if you feed your bees sugar, it can actually help them get more diseases. And that's a big issue. So when we started keeping bees in a new way in 2019, we stopped feeding them sugar water, and a lot of, just every year our bees were doing great. I mean, they were thriving, they were doing fine, and we just totally stopped feeding sugar water. And now we don't do that. And what we did do in 2019 was, when we started catching swarms and we would put the swarm into a new hive, we would give them this container that would have some honey on the inside. So, and what Lazutin does say is, if you do want to feed your bees, you're much better off feeding them honey, and they do a little bit better with honey. Now, over the last 3 or 4 years, honestly, we have stopped feeding altogether. We don't feed them honey, sugar, or any of that stuff. And basically, we're kind of letting the bees be independent and do their thing. So we don't feed them, and still our bees are doing great. Every single year, they're doing well. We have a lot of colonies and they're doing just fine, and we're not feeding them, you know, any kind of sugar or anything like that. But if I were to feed them, I would tell you to give them some honey, and they'll do a lot better. So the last beekeeping myth we're debunking is, of course, that honeybees these days require constant checks in order to ensure they are healthy. And a lot of instructors out there and YouTubers and other beekeepers are basically pushing that you need to be getting inside those hives every other week, checking them out, looking at the brood, looking for the queen, looking for mites, all this stuff, and you just need to be in those hives, totally. And when we kept bees 10 years ago, we did the same thing. I was going into our hives all the time, inspecting them, checking them out, and doing all that stuff, and just completely interrupting their lives. And one thing I have to make clear is that every time you go into those beehives to look at your bees, you are stressing them out. As much as you want to say you love the bees and you care for them and you want to be their best friend and all that stuff, they don't want you anywhere near those hives. They want you to stay away, because they have their idea of how they want to run things, and you are not part of that equation. So we've got to understand that we've got to leave these bees alone and let them do their thing. And when we started keeping bees in 2019, like I've said before, we discovered Lazutin, and he basically came out and said that, you know, you've really got to stop disturbing your bees, and a lot of inspections and stuff can contribute to colony collapse. And basically he was saying that he would only go into his hives twice a year, but he still thought that that was 2 times too many, because he knew how stressful it was for the bees. And so now, what do we do in our apiary? We basically go into our hives twice a year. We go in the spring, we check out the hive, we put in the honey frames, we leave them alone. October comes, we take out the honey frames, we extract the honey, and then we winterize the hive, and then we leave them alone. So other than the spring check and the October honey harvest, we're not doing anything with those bees. We're leaving them alone. We just let them do their thing, and it just seems like they're just doing so much better in our apiary because they don't have that constant human disturbance. And I've seen some crazy stuff. I saw one guy that there was like snow on the ground, and he was like, well, I gotta watch this. My bees are the strongest bees in the world. And he opened his hive and exposed them to the snow. And it was just so crazy because, you know, and again, I keep referring to bees in the wild, but when bees do stay in the wild, they live in a tree and they don't have any human interaction whatsoever. They don't have any inspections, they don't have any checks, and they do great. So bees will thrive a lot more if you can learn to leave them alone. And if you can do that, your apiary will do very well. So there you have it. There's 5 myths we've debunked today in the beekeeping world. And if there's one thing we really want you to take away from this video, is don't overcomplicate beekeeping. Beekeeping can be very simple. It can be easy stuff if you just cut out all the excess and all the fat that you might hear on the internet or in some forms of literature. So just keep it simple. You know, we've learned a lot over this last 15 years keeping bees. And whereas we failed a decade ago doing all the extra steps and jumping through flaming hula hoops and all that crazy stuff, and we failed every single year, since 2019, and we totally changed how we were keeping bees. Now we have found an easy form of beekeeping. We've saved a ton of money. We've had to work a lot less, and guess what? Our bees are surviving. We're still collecting honey, and it's so much more wonderful now, and it's sustainable, and most of all, it is fun. So you need to have fun in beekeeping. Keep it simple. We hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, we'll see you soon.